Greetings, folks. Iolair here. Today's video is another division replay featuring Jimijaz and myself. This time we are in a pair of Tier 6 light cruisers. Jimmy is sailing in the premium French cruiser de Grasse, and I'm in the Soviet cruiser Budyonny. This is a Tier 6 standard battle on Ring. There is one Tier 6 aircraft carrier per team, and there are also only a couple of destroyers per team, and there's actually also a lot of battleships on each side. Now, Jimmy's build in the de Grasse is pretty typical of a fire-starting IFHE light cruiser build, but this is actually the commander from his Henri, which has the buffed expert marksman skill from one of the Honore brothers, and that is kind of overkill for the de Grasse. The de Grasse already has very, very quick turrets out of the box, and then my build in the Budyonny is kind of a standard fire starter IFHE build as well. So this is going to be kind of an interesting match, comparing Jimijaz's performance and mine. The title of the video is Almost Twins, because Jimijaz and I are going to have very similar performance characteristics in this match, or at least in certain ways. And there will be some other notable differences, which will become apparent as the battle moves along here. But otherwise, his contribution and mine are going to be very similar. A couple other ships to keep an eye out for that I'll be calling out during the battle. One is our Ismail, who will be hanging around our cap for most of the battle. He's going to be dishing out the damage pretty well, as we'll see from the leaderboard. And then another is there's going to be a very persistent and sort of tricksy little Jean Wei on the opposing team, as he was recently detected at the Foxtrot 5 sector. In fact, Jimijaz, whose perspective we started with, was pinging on the map because he's being detected by one of the other destroyers. Unfortunately, I take a bad hit through the bow from, I think that's the Pyotr Veliki. But here is the Ochotnik that is on the east flank that's keeping our flank lit. And that's the sector that Jimijaz was asking our carrier to light up because the destroyer was in the area. Unfortunately, like I said, I had taken a bad hit from this Pyotr Veliki. This turn is probably not very well timed, as he probably could have gotten another salvo off, but he isn't going to fire on me again. Now, this is a place where I briefly slow down. I activate my hydro because this Jean Wei that I mentioned earlier is firing from the smoke screen. And he, like I mentioned, he is going to be a very persistent character in this match, as we will see. And I'll be calling him out in a number of different opportunities. Now, Jimmy has been able to position in a way that he can get some fire on opponents that have started to move up on the east flank, including again, he'll get a fire on this New York, which in fact there is the fire, but the New York is going to extinguish that fire very quickly. In fact, it looks like he has two fires on him. He may have taken a fire from another ship. In fact, Jimmy gets a third fire on him, and so it's sensible that he extinguishes those fires. But Jimijaz is going to be looking to get another fire on this New York as soon as possible, which he will be able to do. And then from my perspective in the Budyonny, which we'll be transitioning to shortly, I'm going to be moving more towards the east flank. There's the fire on the New York that's now going to stick. But I'm going to be moving more towards the east flank because the opponents have kind of lemminged to the east side and to sort of the southeast side of the map. And as long-range artillery cruisers, the French and the Soviets and the Germans, they like being on flanks where they can put fire on opponents at range, preferably in a way that's distracted. So that they're working targets that are don't have their guns pointed in their direction, and often being on a particular flank, in this case trying to move over to the east flank, can allow us to get fire on some of these opponents. As again I mentioned, we switch to my perspective here, as I'm looking to get some shots in on the New Mexico and the Normandy that are sitting over here on the more on the west side or the east side of the map. I do get a couple of fires going, one on each battleship. The Normandy, I can't fire on right now because of the terrain, but I am continuing to fire on the New Mexico. Now, here is that John Way player again. He has moved into the middle, and I was hoping he would shoot at me again. So I could fire into the smoke, but he's not going to give me that benefit. And I have to keep moving here because I have to make the assumption that the New Mexico was also potentially going to target me. Fortunately, he did not. Switch back over to Jimijaz's perspective as we've just lost one of our two destroyers, the Kamikaze R, that was trying to open water a gunboat against the Hatsuharu. He didn't have too many opponents that could potentially fire on him or were actively firing on him, but a Kamikaze is not doesn't have very good gun systems at all, and the Hatsuharu is a much better gunboat. In fact, it's the start of the gunboat line in the Japanese destroyers. So it's a better ship. I mean, it's not a great gunboat to begin with in general, but it is better than the Kamikaze, and as I mentioned, we did lose our Kamikaze. Now we switch back to my perspective as I've got some broadside shots here on this Trento. While I was working some of these battleships, I do get in a couple of Citadel hits on the Trento, and now have had to peel away because the Trento was coming back to kind of defend his flank, which is good, but it means that he's now had to go into concealment after I got a couple of good hits on him, and I'm now going to start farming this Normandy again, who's just kind of sitting in the back, farming other ships, firing HE. In fact, he'll fire HE for the entirety of the battle. Looks like the Normandy does now have a couple of fires burning on him. I don't think any of them are mine. I think are from our Gnevny, and we've switched back to Jimijaz's perspective. Now I mentioned that we wanted to be on the flank where we could fire with relative ease on opponents that were in the southeast corner of the map. So Jimijaz decided to come over here as well. But right now we realize that the other problem we have is the carrier is putting a lot of focus on ships that are kind of moving down the west flank. In fact, there you saw that I've just called out to the Gnevny to get back because he is way, way, way overextended. In fact, we can see some rocket ships that are now, or rocket airplanes that are now coming in to put pressure on our Gnevny. And Jimijaz and I have decided we're going to have to go back and position a little closer to our cap because we do have the Ochotnik is actually the Ochotnik I think has been taken down. But yeah, the Janway was last detected still around our cap. We do have this New Mexico that's now starting to close in on our cap. So we're going to have to be in a position to defend. And the Gnevny that I mentioned earlier that was on the west flank has indeed been taken down. Now, one thing I should point out is I think I said at the beginning of the match that there were only 2 destroyers per team. In fact, the opposing team had 3 destroyers and we had 2, so that was my mistake. But nonetheless, our team has lost both of its destroyers, so we don't have that spotting advantage. We do have a carrier who can do spotting, but there's only so much that he can do. He's trying to get, fortunately, our ranger was smart enough to know that he needed to peel away from the opponent's strong flank, and he's going to go and try, at least initially, position behind the island at Charlie 4 and try to give himself some insulation against potential fire and the strength of the opposition. Now, we've been transitioning between Jimijaz's perspective and mine as we've been sort of peeling back here to the back more towards our cap, as our cap is now coming under pressure. The Queen Elizabeth here is going to be moving into the cap. The Jean Wei was again last seen very near our cap, but it turns out that he's not going to be there anymore. I don't remember where we next see him, but the Queen Elizabeth is now going to move into our cap, and we also have a very low health Königsberg that I'm going to be firing on here. He is actually going quite slowly here, so my shot here is too far ahead. I do clip him with 1, leave him with like 60 or some odd hit points, and with the next salvo, I will finish off the Königsberg for my first kill in the game. Come back to focusing on the Queen Elizabeth, calling target on him as he's denying us from getting points from our own cap. So we need to get him down as soon as possible. We do now have a 2-ship deficit, so that's not helping either, although this Queen Elizabeth is going to go down quite shortly, and that will give us get us back to just a 1-ship deficit, as he's just extinguished the fire that was burning on him, but he doesn't have much in the way of health left. I set a double fire on him, and that's unfortunately I would have gotten the kill on that, but our Congo still doing his thing to defend the flank, defend the cap, does get the kill in for his. I think that's his first or second kill, and we're going to switch back to Jimijaz's perspective, as he had been sort of kiting the middle of the map for a while, and he's now moving back towards the cap to get a little closer, because again, this Trento got quite close to our cap, and again, we still haven't spotted the Janway. I think, if I remember correctly, the Janway is going to show up more on the west side, looking to put pressure on our Ismail. And I don't know if at this point whether the opponents knew where our carrier was, but what was originally the strong flank on the east side for the opponents, now the western side is stronger for them, as some of their ships like the Normandy and the New Mexico have now moved back more toward the west side of the map. Jimijaz has now detected the low health New York he was firing on earlier, as have I. So both he and I are firing on this low health battleship, trying to get us back to, well, it won't get us quite back to even on points, but it will at least get us even on ships, as I get a few shells in and finish off the New York for my second kill. But we can see that the Normandy is quite low, the New Mexico is quite low. So Jimijaz and I are going to, again, turn back towards our cap and head back toward a little more towards the west side. There's the Janway again at Echo 4. So he definitely has seen our Ranger. And you can see our Ranger has taken some damage there on the right-hand side of the screen, excuse me. He's having to peel away. So things were, at this point, we're getting kind of frustrating and a little tense, as we unfortunately do lose our Ranger. And I'm not going to complain. Our Ranger, at least in terms of his position, was trying to be aware of where the opponents were and try to keep himself out of harm's way, but they were switching between their strengths of their flanks, and that unfortunately compromised us, especially when the Janway went and detected the Ranger over on the northwest side of the map. Now here you can see Jimijaz is trying to provide some AA support for our low health Ismail. We do lose our Ismail, unfortunately, and that's leaving Jimijaz, myself, and the Congo against 5. So things are not looking very good at this point. Jimijaz, fortunately, has kept most of his health. Jimmy is very good at maneuvering. That's part of his experience being a good destroyer player. And we've switched back to my perspective, excuse me, as I'm trying to help get the New Mexico down, as he's a low health target. There are a couple of low health opponents. The New Mexico and the Normandy is actually quite low. And if we can at least get the battleships down, that will make it a little bit easier for us to try to get us back in this game. New Mexico is almost dead, and with this salvo, I am going to clip him on his bow, and that's going to be my third kill of the game. So up to not quite 90k in damage. I think Jimijaz at this point was relatively close to 90,000 as well. 71,000 at this point. And Jimmy is having to, now is coming under some pretty consistent attacks from both the carrier and the Trento. Now the opposing carrier was detected at Hotel 7, it looks like. And so he is now going to be the focus of, Jimmy is going to be the focus of the carrier. And that's what is going to be the reason that Jimmy's going to lose most of his health here over the next few minutes. In fact, he's lost quite a bit already. as he's now detected the Ranger. He switched to armor piercing here. The Ranger is a quite thinly armored carrier, and given flat broadside can be penetrated and citadeled quite easily by light cruisers. And there he does in fact get a citadel. Looks like he took out the engine, but the damage control was ready. And in fact, Jimmy gets another citadel, but he's having to peel away here because, again, he's coming under torpedo attack. This maneuver is going to be a reflection of the good speed and rudder shift of the Gross. And again, here Jimmy is coming under pressure of both the carrier and the Trento. We switch back to my perspective as I've now set a double fire on the Normandy. Thankfully, again, the Normandy continues to fire a high explosive for the entirety of the match. And that will be the last salvo he will fire as I will finish off the Normandy for my 4th kill. So I'm just shy of 100,000 in damage. And the next big threat, I'm running my Hydro right now because my spider sensors are tingling. The Janway that I've been mentioning throughout this replay was seen behind the island at Charlie 4. So I, at this point, given on how he was playing, I suspected that he was looking to try to ambush me with torpedoes. Nobody is providing him visibility, so I've turned away, but I have my Hydro going, so hopefully I can avoid torpedoes that he may have sent. Again, we have switched back to Jimmy's perspective because he's coming under relentless attack from both the carrier and the Trento. At this point, we really needed our Congo to get closer to the action and start putting more fire on the Trento, try to get him down so that at least we could get a lead. Jimmy takes another hit from the carrier. He had just used damage control, so he won't be able to put that fire out. He will survive the fire. Switch briefly to my perspective as I get detected here, and there is the Janway again in the position at Charlie 4. I do get my turrets over, but I do tag him with a few, but I don't quite get him down. And we switch back to Jimijaz's perspective as our Congo does earn his pay and take out the Trento. So now we have a lead, but it's a very precarious lead because if we lose another ship and Jimijaz is the lowest health of the three of us, the opponents will be in the lead again. So I'm under some pressure to look for and take out the destroyer because I know that Jimmy if he can't tolerate even a single strike from the carrier. So we need to make every effort to destroy another ship to basically guarantee that we can win. Now, I did detect the Ranger, but he did not detect me. And I purposefully held my fire because I don't want the Janway to know my position. I want him to not know where I am so that I happen to know that he's behind this island because right now I'm undetected. I'm going to put my plane up here in an effort to detect the destroyer. I do get lit. There is the destroyer. I apologize for the hardcore panning here. This is a side effect of the using the spotter planes. But fortunately, the destroyer, unfortunately for him, he makes the mistake of firing his guns, which revealed his position. I do kill the destroyer for my Kraken, and at the same moment, Jimmy unfortunately does go down, but because of the ship exchange, we retain our lead, and we are going to win this match with literally seconds remaining. We're down to just about 10 seconds, and there you can see the call out into chat. Good game. This indeed was a good match, nice and close. Both Jimmy and I had just a shade over 100,000 each. So we both did very well in terms of our damage, very similar perspectives. We come in second and third. Our Ismail that I mentioned earlier, he was definitely dishing out the damage, but we didn't quite get the kills that we needed from him. I was able to do some cleanup, and between that and our Congo, we were able to get the win. So very good match, very enjoyable game, and I'm glad that Jimmy and I were able to contribute as much as we were. So I hope you enjoyed the replay and the commentary. Please do leave your comments below, and as always, we hope to see you out there on the virtual seas, and we wish you happy sailing.